with you, and I want to introduce the Reverend Carol Hovis. She is the Executive Director of the Marin Interfaith Council, who also has some words of welcome for you.
So again, I echo Bethany's welcome, and for those of you that I don't know, I am a Presbyterian minister and director of the Marin Interfaith Council, and it is with great pleasure that our staff and our board welcomes all of you. Marin Interfaith Council has been around for over 30 years, and this particular initiative with our youth and young adults is very exciting for us. Annie Reynolds, who you will meet in a few moments, is on our board of directors. And through Annie and Bethany and our board and a retreat we had in December, we said, you know, working and reaching out to youth in Marin County is one of our priorities. We've been doing it for several years. Bethany and several of the religious leaders in the congregations of Marin have been meeting regularly. We've been doing gleaning events at Green Gulch Farm every year. There's been retreats out at Vedanta in Olima. And so this is kind of the next step. And so we're thrilled for this opportunity. And when you look at the blue program that was on your chair, there's a kind of a double entendre there. The intended meaning was, what does faith look like in the millennial generation? I think after tonight we will also be feeling a lot of faith in the millennial generation. So I love the fact that that can be read several different ways. So with no further ado, I am going to turn this over to the people that you're really here to engage with. So, Annie Reynolds.
Welcome to Faith in the Millennial Generation. This is our first youth event, and we hope that it's the first of many. Like I said, I'm Annie Reynolds. I'm a senior at Tam High. I'll be graduating in 3 weeks. And I'll be going to Lewis and Clark College in Portland. I serve on the MIC board, and I've been working with the youth branch of MIC, which so far is Carol, Bethany, Lizzie Chadbourne, who's one of our panelists tonight, Stephanie Listug. Stephanie, where are you? She's back there. And myself. And we've been working to pilot a series of events to provide opportunities for youth to explore different faith traditions and to better understand them. So we want to promote spiritual or religious literacy as a grounds to advocate for justice in the future. So MIC really has inspired me to harness my curiosity for spiritual exploration, and it's really the only outlet that I've had to collaborate with a diverse range of people, and I hope to continue this work through college and beyond. I'm sure I can speak for our whole team when I say that we feel blessed to be able to work with all of you throughout this interfaith journey. The connections built with a diverse range of people and their respective faith traditions really accounts for a lot of the gratification in this work. So thank you so much for your participation and for showing up. That's where it all starts. And coming together for a greater cause starts with conversation, and that's why we're all here tonight. So that being said, we're very grateful to have gotten connected with our panelists. They all have important stories and ideas to share with us, so I want to get started. I'll let the panelists introduce themselves, and would you please all share, along with your brief introduction, a ritual, holiday, or principle of your tradition that's important to you? Why don't we start with Thor?
My name is Thor Olson. I go to Santa Rosa Junior College. I'm currently a neuroscience major. I work there tutoring. I tutor math, science, philosophy. I am currently the vice president of advocacy on the student government there at SRJC as well. I started the Atheists and Skeptics Club on my campus way too long ago. And so I guess I'm sort of unique to this panel in that I'm an atheist. And atheism very simply means that I don't have a belief in any particular god or gods. And I guess a tradition that I have. You know, honestly, I think one reason I created the Atheists and Skeptics Club in particular was just sort of atheists, aren't the most trusted, minority, and so like there's not very much of a community there. So I really wanted to build a community for people who didn't, have this particular faith, and just a place for not just atheists to be able to discuss amongst themselves, but a place for people who are curious about atheism or what it even means, or like, who might be scared of it or whatever, to be able to come and converse and have respectful dialogue. I guess that's me.
Hi, my name is Maz Sheikh. I'm a Muslim and I go to Tam High. I'll be graduating this June, and I plan to go to college in Marin, hopefully transfer out to UC Berkeley. I want to major in mechanical engineering because it really interests me. A tradition or a holiday that's really important to me, I guess, is the month of Ramadan. It's the Islamic. It's an Islamic month where from sunrise to sunset we fast. And it's really important to me, regardless if I have football practice or wrestling practice, I'll still fast. And yeah.
Hi, my name is Arina Faustini, and I studied psychology, business administration with an emphasis in marketing, and I am a Baha'i. And one of the Baha'i traditions, I'll just clarify, there's actually no such thing as a tradition or ritual in the Baha'i faith. It's not permissible. Everything's left up to your culture and interpretation, so everything's kind of accepted, and we don't want you to get stuck in one particular vein. But one thing that's important to me about the Baha'i faith is that the whole purpose of the religion is to bring about unity, and unity happens to be my favorite virtue, so that is what is most important to me.
My name is Lizzie Chadbourne. I'm a senior at Marin Academy, and I'll be attending New York University in the fall to study psychology. I am one of the leaders of the Christian student organization at MA, and I attend the United Church of Christ in Mill Valley. A tradition in Christianity that's important to me is the combination between Advent and Christmas, because in Advent's the time before Christmas is in preparation. And it's kind of a solemn time, kind of for prayer, and so the combination between that and having kind of a very joyful holiday kind of highlights the two parts of Christianity that are important to me.
Hi, my name is Rachel Firm. I'm a senior at Tam High. I'm Jewish, and I belong to the congregation Road of Shalom. My primary activity in the Jewish community, besides different community service times through my temple, has been with the Dillerteen Fellows, which is a global youth leadership program that culminated in a month-long trip to Israel that explored Jewish identity and leadership and community service, or in Judaism, tikkun olam, which is the word for repairing the world. This tradition in Judaism that's most important to me is Shabbat, which is the Jewish Sabbath, and in Israel today, where everyone takes the day off and you go and reconvene with family, you don't use technology or your cars, and really reflect and spend that day. So what my family's interpretation of that has been is to have a dinner where we have guests over, and this has incorporated guests from over like 11 different countries of many different faiths, incorporating their traditions, and is a time where we have a long conversation uninterrupted by technology, without obligations after, where we really delve into conversation in a way that you don't on other parts of the year. And to me, this really encapsulates a lot of what Judaism is, which is tradition and the cultural, and reinforcing the cultural values of communication and community and reflection.
My name is Lauren Dito, and I grew up here in San Rafael. I lived in New Orleans for about 11 years, working in public health for a bunch of that, and yoga teaching, and also going to school. But I've been living at Green Gulch Farm the last few years, practicing Zen Buddhism, so it's a Japanese style of Buddhism. I'm sure we'll talk more later, but there are many styles and sects of Buddhism. I I think that I'm going to say, and this might be a little intense to start right off, but one of my favorite kind of principles, and this was pretty new to me, but I think for people who study psychology, you kind of start going this direction, or neuroscience down there, but this idea of what we call conscious construction. And it's just this idea that our minds are creating our world. And that sounds really heady and scholarly, but what I found was that it was very liberating in that we each have a different view of the world, and none of them will be the same. And so in which case we're all kind of free from the expectation that your world is going to be my world, and that we can then move past that attempt to make us the same. And I just found that really encouraging and supportive sort of springboard to look at the world. So.
Thank you so much to all of you for your introductions. In a secular society, it's inevitable that there may be challenges as a faithful individual, such as facing stereotypes or misconceptions. So for some, standing up against these challenges is a fundamental part in staying true to their beliefs or their practice. So I have a two-part question for you. Why is your faith important to you? And what's a misconception about your faith or tradition that you would want to be cleared up?
Awesome. Okay. Well, gosh. All right. So I guess I'd start off by saying, like, atheism is a pretty minority point of view right now in our culture. In other cultures, in other places, it's semi-minority, somewhat majority in some. But in America especially, we represent the non-religious point of view, not even specifically atheist, but non-religious represents about 15% of the United States. And and because of that, I mean, there's a lot of misconceptions that have kind of grown around atheism. In fact, some studies in 2011, and even some recent studies, have shown that atheists are one of the least trusted minorities that are in the United States right now. In fact, one that was very recent showed that atheism was at the very bottom of a list of people that would vote for president. So if someone was an atheist, very few people would vote for an atheist. Something like 43% of respondents just would not have voted for an atheist. So there's obviously there's this mistrust of atheism, but I think probably one of the biggest misconceptions of atheism is sort of this idea that atheists know that there is no God. Like, oh, if you're an atheist, you're saying there definitely isn't a God, right? Like, how do you know there isn't a God? I personally call myself an atheist agnostic, and basically I believe that atheism is specifically tackling the idea of belief, whether or not you believe that there's a God, whereas agnosticism is more addressing sort of your general knowledge of something. So in that sense, I don't know. There might be a God. I don't know whether or not there is. But as far as I've seen, as far as the many discussions I've had with various religions and various people, I haven't been convinced that there is a God so far. But I could be convinced. I think those are the main issues. I'm sure I'll get plenty of questions about the rest of philosophy.
My religion pretty much defines me, I guess. I strive to make my lifestyle to revolve around my religion. I try to I try to instill all the teachings of the Quran and stuff like that into my everyday lives and stuff. And one misconception I think I should clear up is the idea of jihad. Jihad, I think, is misunderstood by a lot of people. The jihad that terrorists like Al-Qaeda and stuff are trying to justify their actions by is one part, and that one part is not even used properly. I believe the one that they're trying to use is that if a group of people is oppressing you, you have the right to fight back against them. But it has nothing to do with like non-believers of Islam. It can be like Muslims who are oppressing Muslims. The oppressed have the right to fight back. But there's also like a spiritual side to jihad also. Jihad is like fighting with your inner demons, you know? It's like trying to make yourself a better person. So I think that should be cleared up. And yeah.
I think everyone has their own personal jihad that they're fighting. I'm, as I said, a Baha'i, and what was the question again?
Why is your faith important to you, and what's the misconception that you want to clear up?
I already talked about this. My faith is important to me because I love the concept of unity. We were talking earlier, we're kind of third culture kids here, and if you haven't heard of that phenomenon, it's basically, you know, my mom's Persian, my father's Italian, I was born in England and raised in Arizona, and here I am in the Silicon Valley. I'm completely confused, and then they have all these check boxes in survey and says, you belong to this, and I'm like, I don't belong to any of that, so... So I love the fact that I don't have to belong to any of that, and that I'm accepted as is. And as our generations continue to intermix, and you travel around the world, and we're all connected, that's going to start becoming a lot more prevalent than it is now. So unity is really important to me specifically. And the one of the misconceptions of the Baha'i faith that I get quite often, if you've ever even heard of it, is, oh, you're the guys that really believe in everybody, and that's true. But here's where the misconception comes along. We're not really kind of floating along in space, not doing anything and just loving everybody. There is a structure to the Baha'i faith. There is one of the most incredible democratic processes for electing the I call them servant leaders of the faith, who help govern and manage all of the different, areas and, communities and countries and regions. Our main focus is bringing about the unification of the world. It's been a lot easier since communication is global, but that's kind of one of the misconceptions is, we're not just floating along, we definitely have an order, and there's definitely programs of growth that we strive and focus towards building. So,
Oh, yeah, okay. My faith is important to me. I think people often ask me why I go to church, and I think the reasons that I give have to do with, one, that it means that I'm in a community with people who have similar values to me, which is generally to do with, at least in my particular church, and especially in this area, which is social justice and helping others and living your life as a kind person. And then also, it's very humbling because, whenever I pray, I always think about the fact that there are people all over the world praying as well in their own faiths, and they're praying for their own things. And people like you can pray, for I hope I do well on this test, or you can pray for an entire country. And so I always think about when I'm praying, I don't usually pray well to do well on a test because I don't really believe in that. But if I was praying something that was kind of really specific to my life, I think about the fact that there are people all over the world who are praying for things that are specific to their life that I don't understand, and it just reminds me that my problems aren't the most important thing. And a misconception, there are a lot, especially here, and I often think that whenever people see that I'm wearing a cross or I mention that I go to church, people have a lot of ideas about what I'm like that I would say are probably most not true, apart from the fact that I, believe in God. I think people believe that I'm conservative socially, which definitely is not true personally. And of course, one of the issues is that something I've been kind of exploring a lot is the fact that there are the main kind of Christians that people see here in the news are really conservative, and they're saying things that kind of get pinned on every person who identifies as being Christian. And that's something that I've kind of had to deal with, that, you know, anything that, you know, a really famous pastor has to say doesn't necessarily apply to everybody. So, yeah.
Okay, so one misconception I think about my faith, you could say, is that to me, the religious component of Judaism is just one small component of what it means to be Jewish. I think what distinguishes Judaism from any other form of religion is that it really, to most Jews, is an ethnicity, and one component of that may be religious. I know I personally don't view myself as religious, but very Jewish culturally and ethnically, and so I think that that's a huge misconception, and I think that that also explains a lot why it's important to me, because that's the really foundation of my identity in so many ways. A lot of my values derive, my traditions, the way I've been raised, with the emphasis on certain things, and it's definitely, the older I become and the more that I do self-discovery and all that, the more I'm realizing how central or how dominant Jewish culture is in who I am.
I think that I would say my tradition is important to me in the sense that, like someone else said, that it provides a community of people to kind of rally around. I think part of the Buddhist tradition, at least, is calling upon us to do a lot of kind of difficult personal work. Studying our own being is kind of the central core of our practice, and we're not always going to like what we see, and we're being encouraged and supported to kind of face it and not be afraid, and to be really open, and I think in the hopes that that will allow us to extend that to other people as well. And so I think having that community of support to be there for you and to kind of be doing it along with you is really helpful. And a misconception, I think there are many. I'll just pick one, and I think the idea that's kind of popular right now with Zen, and we get it at Green Gulch all the time. People come out and it's beautiful there, and it is quite peaceful. But the idea that if you are Zen, you must be so Zen. You're like so relaxed, and you're so calm and stress-free all the time, and happy, and that's like your every minute of every life. I think we are just like everyone else, and our community is just like every other community, and that that it's not possible to be happy and Zen all the time.
Thank you. So next, those of us on the youth board thought of some specific questions for each one of you. And by the way, all of the panelists have had time to think about these questions before, so no need to be nervous about that. Okay, so Thor, we'll start with you. Can you share with us your spiritual journey? How did you, well, I don't know if it was a decision, but how did you come to know that you were atheist?
Yeah, I guess that's an interesting question. Gosh, I was raised by my mother over here. Hello, Mom. How's it going? I was raised Christian with, I had like a children's Bible and everything, and like, I knew the popular stories and stuff like that. But I think I was more raised with an idea of just being a good person in general, less emphasis on the religious aspects of it, which is, thank you, Mom, you're awesome. Yeah, so, I mean, I can remember at some point when I was young, just sort of, and I'm sure a lot of people of faith have experienced this as well, of just kind of, while I was praying, sort of just feeling like I was sort of talking to myself, it just felt like I was just talking to myself, it felt awkward. So, as I was going through high school and stuff, I I went to high school at Francis Drake, which is very close to Fairfax, and pretty I guess, you know, not to be derogatory, but pretty hippie kind of area. And so I was less faith, you know, I had less sort of a Christian inspiration there, but there was definitely a sort of a spiritual atmosphere. And so I really got into like Buddhism, actually. There's spirit rock down there. And yeah, so I was more Buddhist while in high school and a little bit into college. But as I was sort of getting into college, I became more exposed to sort of this idea of atheism. And I guess I would describe myself as an agnostic at that point, just an agnostic. Yeah, I remember like sort of just listening to like a lot of science and skepticism podcasts and sort of like reading up a lot on those kinds of ideas and just kind of thinking to myself, this is, I kind of actually see myself as what they're describing. They're not, you know, I used to think atheism was just this, I hate, you know, I hate God or I hate religion or I know that it doesn't exist, but it's just, I mean, there are as many different types of atheists as there are any other people. You know, atheism is simply just, you don't believe that there's a God, you just haven't been convinced. Everything after that is just, it's just adding on, you know? Yeah, it was around in early college when I sort of discovered I was probably an atheist, and so I started the club to explore that. I was like, I want to talk to people about this, like, what is this thing? I'm so new to all of this, philosophy, everything. I just want to talk to people all the time about these things, about these questions. I was so passionate back then. Oh. But anyway, yeah, so that's why I started the club, and I talked about it for years now and discussed with many different people, gone back and forth between all sorts of different things, but I've pretty much remained an atheist since. That was about 5-6 years ago, I guess. Yeah, I guess that's my journey.
Well, thank you so much. Okay, Maz, as you mentioned, we know in Islam, Ramadan, a month of fasting, as well as prayer rituals, are crucial parts of your tradition regarded as 2 of the 5 pillars of Islam. How do you manage these rituals in your high school life, and what's it like to be Muslim in Marin County as a high schooler?
Well, like I said before, I do fast every Ramadan for all the 30 or like 29 or 31 days because in the Islamic calendar is different from the traditional calendar because it goes by the moon cycles, not by set dates. Anyways, yeah, it's really important to me. So I had some conflictions like back in freshman year of high school. Like I really wanted to do freshman football during the summer, but it was Ramadan, so I couldn't eat or drink. So that posed a problem. But I chose to fast instead because really it's more important to me than football. Next year I manned up a little and I still fasted, but I did football at the same time, which was difficult, but I've been doing it since like 1st grade, so it wasn't that different, I guess. I pray 5 times a day. Sometimes during school, if I have like the time, like during a passing period or during lunch, not usually. If I miss a prayer, we have this thing called like Qaza namaz. Namaz is prayer. Qaza means make up. So I can just make up the prayers that I missed. And I usually go to the mosque 1 to 3 times a day. Usually after school or about late at night. The times that I go usually differ because as the earth goes around the sun, the seasons change and the time for sunset and like all that good stuff changes too. And living in Marin, I feel like people of Marin are really accepting of all people, so being a Muslim in Marin, it's not that hard actually. You can be anybody and be accepted here. I feel like Marinites or Mariners are very good people. Yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you, Maz. Okay, so for Ariana, we'd like to know how your faith has supported you in a time of adversity in your life.
So, well, number one, I'm here sitting in front of people talking, and I'm normally behind a computer screen, so definitely leveraging my faith to be here. You say the right thing. So there's always a struggle throughout whatever age you're going through, whether, you know, I'm 13 and wondering why I can't go to the school dance, or whether I'm, you know, 21 and in college and wondering, you know, oh man, I don't get invited to the parties because I don't drink. And so, you know, getting into the workforce, it's kind of the same thing happens. You're not the partier, you don't get invited to the special meetings or, you know, whatever, the Friday luncheons and stuff like that. So I always use my faith to kind of just step back and say, hey, you know, journey is you know, Friday luncheon is not the end of the world. And, you know, throughout this journey of life, I will meet many obstacles, much more severe than a Friday luncheon. And I can always fall back on my faith, God, prayer, and it's calming for me. I mean, you don't have to believe in a God to have reflective experience, or you can believe in many gods and still have that experience of falling back on faith. And for me, you know, during my times of adversity, prayer to God is definitely something that has brought me out of myself and my ego and, you know, all that pity party stuff, and kind of brought me to reality that, you know, I am one human being in this great wide universe, and who knows what else is out there, right? And why am I more important than anybody else that, you know, I have to be sad about something like that? So it gives perspective.
Ariana, thank you. So, Lizzie, especially in Marin, many who consider themselves Christian only attend church at Christmas and Easter, for example. And as a more active member in your Christian community, what does it mean to you to be a serious practicing Christian today?
Well, I completely related to what Maz said about having his religion impact all aspects of his life, and that's how I feel about Christianity in mine, because it does, you know, those bracelets that say, like, what would Jesus do? I think about that all the time. And it's like, especially when I'm in a difficult situation, when I have to make the decision whether to kind of do something that would make me happier or do something that would make someone else happier, it can be really hard, because obviously you would say, oh, Jesus would make the other person happier, but sometimes that's not the right thing to do, and sometimes that would be hurtful to yourself. And so I think it's the kind of thing where the reason why it's so important to me and the way I think, it's because I think about it all the time, and I kind of weigh that in my mind. And so it isn't, to me, I mean, I think, you know, obviously Easter and Christmas are incredibly important in Christian faith, and attending church on those days and still identifying as Christian is great as well. But for me, it's about being kind of a Christian literally every day, whether you're in church or not. It isn't even really about going to church on every Sunday. It's more to do, for me, with like how I interact in the world and my worldview and how I treat other people and myself.
Thank you, Lizzie. Rachel, do you see Jewish and American traditions as distinct cultures, and what are some of the joys and challenges of being a Jewish American?
Okay. This is like a very complex question, because this is kind of what we explored over like a 15-month program, so I'll try to keep this not very convoluted. But basically, I very much identify as both as an American Jew, and I think, okay, I'm trying to figure out how to say this. As I was describing before, as I find Judaism to be an ethnicity just as strongly as I'm American, I think in a lot of ways there's a lot of mutual values, as America was founded by Judeo-Christian beliefs, but there are definitely a lot of distinctions that I think come in Jewish culture. For example, there's a very, very strong emphasis on memory and tradition and having a very strong connection with the past of your faith. For example, Memorial Day is coming up this Monday. I don't know what anyone's doing except for sleeping in to get rid of prom, whatever. So, or going to the pancake breakfast. But in Judaism, it's something like we know on Holocaust Remembrance Day or on is a different Jewish holidays. You know that the whole world, the whole Jewish community is stopped and take that day to really reflect. There's a really strong value of every year you repeating Jewish history over. That's what our traditions and like our holidays are, basically communicating Jewish history down to our children. And I think another Jewish value that is distinct is really, really the notion of. I think that in American culture it's a lot more like, well, there's a lot of like American dream capitalism and every man for their own in a certain way, and whereas with Judaism, there's the strongest emphasis. I would say this core value of Judaism is the constant pursuit to make the world a better place as a community, and a really strong drive for social justice. And I think that, and an enormous, enormous emphasis on community, education, and always, always questioning. And for me, I think that that really defines so much going through my life. Instead of just being faced with a situation, viewing the world through a Jewish lens means seeing a situation and what can I do to make this better? How can I explore it? How can I get to the root of what all this means? And is there anything tricky about this? Like never accepting something you just hear and really, really, really questioning it. And I think that's so, I don't know, in that way that it's kind of distinct. And then also, one challenge I would say is that even though you're not a dual citizenship, one part of Jewish identity that's very complex for a lot of people is the whole Israeli-Palestinian conflict and everything. And being raised Jewish, the existence of Israel and the state of Israel is something that unites you across the entire world with all Jews, and that's a really central component to your identity. So it's really a big challenge to treat it as just an objective other political situation that's occurring. And it's hard because you're being judged as being biased because you're Jewish about Israel, and it's really hard to communicate about that when it's something that's so central to who you are, I would say. And another thing, last point I'll make about this is that the whole notion of being American and Jewish, this is like one other really big complexity within the Jewish nationality, religion, whatever you want to call it, is the whole notion of, it's related to the existence of the state of Israel, is that, a lot of people look down, and when Jewish people get integrated into their countries wherever they live, they call it like, there's a negative connotation to assimilation, and they say we're losing our Jewish identity and we're letting these traditions fail. And that's why tradition is so important, because for 2,000 years we haven't had a Jewish state, we haven't had a place being united, we've been persecuted, and so I think that for the existence of Judaism, for Judaism to exist, American Jewry or French Jewry, or being an Italian Jew or an Argentinian Jew, but maintaining both parts of your identity is so crucial to the survival of Judaism and the survival of Israel, as the survival of Israel is important to us in the diaspora. So, I'm sorry, I know that was convoluted. These are very, very complicated issues. I'm trying to I don't know.
Well done.
Exactly.
Very well
so
done.
Sorry about that, but yeah, it's hard. It's really complex, and yeah.
Thank you, Rachel. Yeah, exactly. So, question for Lauren. Today in society, it's considered a cool trend to explore Buddhism or to want to become Buddhist. So we want to ask you, what do you think is attractive about Buddhism to so many in society today? And to you, what does it mean to truly be Buddhist?
Good question. I think I'd like to start by kind of dissecting the question just a little bit when it comes to sort of talking about trends in culture. because I don't know that I can say with confidence, at least, that Buddhism as a trend is popular across culture. I don't know that I would say that the African American population is finding it cool to be Buddhist, or that different socioeconomic classes are finding it cool or attractive to be Buddhist. I think that there's kind of a mainstream, maybe even go as far as to say kind of white, middle to upper class sort of trend in Buddhism that's at least of some concern to the group, just in trying to look at, as a community, how open are we actually being? We, kind of preach openness or practice openness, but what is that reflecting in, and how is that being perceived? And so I appreciated what Rachel mentioned about, these kind of capitalist drives or financial drives in mainstream, that I kind of feel like that's related to sort of what is so attractive, is that now we're seeing, you have a beautiful Zen home, you have Zen furniture, you have Zen flower pots, and they're all being promoted to you as a way to bring you happiness. And so I think that's kind of where they've kind of latched on and sort of exploited this concept of enlightenment, perhaps, to guarantee you some kind of happiness. And if we can associate that with as many different things that you can obtain, you are that much closer then to enlightenment. But then you, of course, have to acknowledge that there are many people that cannot obtain all of these things, so it almost might even be sort of a turnoff, that if you can't have these, then you definitely can't be Buddhist. So I think it gets complicated. And so what attracted me, actually, and this is where it's kind of ironically funny, perhaps, that it was the simplicity of Zen practice that drove me to sort of to pick up my life and sell my car and quit my job and move to Green Gulch in the hopes that I would have support to live a simpler way. My husband and I moved there together, and you can imagine my parents' subtle horror, that I am going to almost like move back into a dorm or something like that. But they live in San Rafael, they come to visit, and they can't really quite deny that there is this, thriving community of people that are trying really hard to work together, and that giving up some things has not been a painful sacrifice, that we've lost something. So I think that the desire for a different way of life is sort of what was attractive to me about the Buddhist practice, and that there were communities that actually existed to support that, like Green Gulch Farm and San Francisco Zen Center and Spirit Rock, and all these places are kind of popping up. What was the last part of the question?
What does it really mean to be Buddhist to you?
Oh, dang, I wish I didn't ask that question for clarification. That's the hardest question. Luckily, I don't think it's so clear, and I don't think it's so defined, actually. I think some people might even argue that you can be Buddhist and Jewish, or Buddhist... Yes. Say it again?
Bujus, it's very common.
That's a new word today. So, I think there's a lot of freedom within being Buddhist, and I think that's part of possibly being Buddhist, is you don't have to call yourself Buddhist. But that there are some core values. I think there's a push towards wisdom and compassion. I would say are like two really central tenets, and there's a lot of structure in some ways to sort of encourage you to question yourself and question and question and question, but with some prompts. I think that's what's helpful, is you question, but there are prompts. We have precepts. They're kind of like commandments, you might say, but they're actually more like personal questions. How do I feel when I made this choice? And it's just kind of a form, we like to say forms, support to sort of look at our life and look at it and turn it and turn it. So that's being Buddhist. Was that clear enough?
It's beautiful. Thank you. Thanks to all of you. Very inspirational. So at this time, we'll open up an opportunity for questions from you guys. If you have a question, just raise your hand, and we have microphones on either side, or Colleen will pass a microphone to you. So whoever wants to go first, just please raise your hand. Yes.
Your generation is famously reluctant to identify with institutions, and I'm wondering if you feel as if your traditions have prepared you to have discussions with your peers about your traditions well enough so you don't need to bring them to your place, or whether you find openness among your peers to talking about these religious traditions that you represent.
So this is a question across the board here?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Whoever wants to answer it can answer it, but you can pass.
Yeah, I guess it's pretty interesting for atheists because we don't have actually, a specific place to go. So one thing that at least the Atheists and Skeptics Club has done, and a lot of sort of secular affiliated or atheist affiliated groups on college campuses or just across the nation have done, is just a lot of sort of just like, at least like at the JC, we have tabling. We usually have regular tabling where we're just presenting ourselves and being like, hey, we exist, like, we're a thing, it's cool. Please, like, ask us. We have a sign that says, ask an atheist. Also, high five an atheist as well. But yeah, like, we're totally open just to be there out in the community, whether it's at the JC or, around the community itself. Just to talk to people, just to be out there and be like, hey, our worldview exists. It's, we're not horrible people. Please don't trust the internet. It's full of lies. Anyway, yeah. So I guess that's simple enough.
I feel like in around my age group for Muslims in my community, it really depends on the person. I myself go to the mosque or masjid about, like I said, 1 to 3 times a day, sometimes even more. So I feel like I am sufficiently knowledgeable to like answer questions if people were to ask me about my religion. But then again, there are some people who don't really know that much about my religion, but they identify themselves as Muslims. And then again, there are those people who around my age group that are very knowledgeable about Islam, more than me. So I feel like myself, I can probably answer general or more than just general questions about my religion.
So I think I'd like to answer this question because the Baha'i faith has worked with the University of Columbia to develop something called the Ruhi Institute, and it is a series of books and study that is all focused on community development and spiritual development of your community, as well as educational and just interactive. And so you do not have to be a Baha'i to participate in this. And the Baha'is are actively engaged in community development. People who are not Baha'is are actively engaged in community development. As I said before, the purpose and the goal of Baha'i faith is to unite the world. We're all human beings. We can all get along. And you can remain an atheist. You can remain a Jew. You can remain Muslim or Baha'i or Christian or whatever your faith is, Buddhist. And we can all work together and live harmoniously. And so, Baha'is can get together to talk, but the purpose is not for Baha'is to get together and just talk. There's a lot of action, and it's to talk with everybody, not just the Baha'is. So it's very outward facing.
I really like the part of the question about whether my peers were open to talking about it and whether I was as well. I'm very lucky to have friends who have actually asked whether they could come to church with me because they're curious, and whether it's, whether they have a faith background in Christianity or nothing, or Judaism or anything, which I really appreciate, because it's not only kind of showing interest in what I believe, but also showing interest in my life. And I personally love talking about my faith, and I think it's partly just because to talk about the misconceptions, and I think the easiest way to dispel any kind of misconceptions is to talk and to be honest and open and proud and identify as Christian in kind of social situations. I know I have a lot of friends who are Christian who you wouldn't want to say in a social situation. And then I have others who are more like me and want to do it. And so not everybody's open. I will say that and I have a lot of people, whenever I have a kind of a Christian club meeting, will say, you should come, and they'll be like, but I'm not Christian. And we're like, you don't have to be. And everybody knows, like, that's true. Everybody knows you don't have to be Christian. They just don't think it really applies to their life, and so they don't want to explore it, which is very frustrating to me, because I love to explore other things, and I really appreciate it when people really want to hear more.
Okay, so I think that growing up, one of the largest focuses of Judaism is asking questions. Our biggest holiday is basically, the tradition is to ask the youngest child in the family a bunch of questions, and that's what you pass on, the notion, the foremost thing that you want your child to know about being Jewish on this tradition isn't, this is what you need to know, this is what you're supposed to believe. It's teaching your children to ask those questions, and instilling a sense of curiosity and a sense of almost doubt towards Judaism. I know, like, in order to convert to Judaism, in fact, you have to go to multiple different rabbis, and they ask you questions. Why would you ever want to do this? You see we're hated. You see we're persecuted. Why would you want to do this? It's like probably one of the only religions never converted, ever, and in fact, really, really promotes a deep amount of questioning of the religion, and really, really emphasizes completely different interpretations. I've talked about this before, I don't know here, but there's kind of the Jewish equivalent to a communion or whatever is a bar mitzvah, and on that day, what happens is, in order to, I guess, affirm yourself in Judaism in whatever way, you read that week's a section of the Torah, and then what you do as your 13-year-old self is you describe what your interpretation is, and you teach your community what that means to you, and you know that on that day, thousands of Jews around the world are describing their own interpretation. So it really is widely emphasized on a lot of openness, a lot of questioning, and yeah, definitely that. And also I love when friends ask questions about it, because it's such a part of who I am, and it's something that, like, I don't have none of my school friends are Jewish, and I have a Jewish community, which I recently found that's extremely valuable to me. And even having Annie as someone, she asks me questions about it all the time, and we compare and talk about faiths, and that's really, really brought us together on a different level than, so that's, because it's so important to me, I do love talking about it, because it is something that I can't relate to with a lot of people.
I think, in part, this question is a little difficult for me to answer, because I think my lifestyle choice of living in a residential Buddhist community is, I think, markedly different in people's minds than just, kind of an everyday Zen practitioner, because people my friend who lives in New York, she says, oh, it's so great, I get to tell my friends I have a friend who lives in a commune, So I'm like this cool commune friend. And, but that being said, so to people to hear that I wake up at 4:30 every morning and that I go to sit meditation every morning, I don't know that I ever would have imagined that I would be such a fervent religious practitioner of going to do some kind of a practice every morning that early. But I do think that there is a lot of material in the world of Buddhism to really kind of meet people wherever they are. So whether it's to talk about mindfulness in tough situations of their life, or whether it's an interest in existential philosophy or radical environmentalism. I think there's actually quite a bit of room to meet people, and I think that's what really attracted me to Buddhism, was that there were so many gates to enter, and that there wasn't a mandatory gate. And so people are pretty interested, I think.
I want to encourage the young adults to ask questions too. All right.
Hi. You don't all have to answer this, but if any of you are interested, and especially for those of you of faith, what do you think is the value of faith and of organized religion in a society, and especially around here, where it is often devalued?
I'll try to answer that question. I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Yeah. What do you think is the value of faith in organized religion?
For me, my faith is like kind of like an outline of how my life should be done, I guess. I believe a religion, not all the time, such as Thor's case, but sometimes it gives a person a set of values that they grow up with. Well, I guess Thor did. Anyways, it gives a person a set of values that they grow up with, and they try to strive to incorporate into their lifestyles. So I believe,
Sure, yeah. I guess I think the value of any sort of organizing at all, any sort of with or without faith, is just the community aspect. We're social creatures. We desire the company of others, and I think it's super important. Like just on a very basic, a very natural level, like we need that sort of community. And on a global, on a wider scale, sort of in line with Baha'i here, like, we kind of do need to get together as a community on Earth as a whole if we're going to get like good things done, like preventing global warming and surviving, hopefully. We really need to work together, and so any sort of community like towards that end is extremely important. Yeah, I guess that's my 2 cents.
I'm trying to find an intelligent way to respond to this because I'm not that great at intelligent questions here. If I were a finger moving solitary by myself, and then I was joined by another finger in a repetitious pattern, and then maybe my thumb over here, and then maybe I had my right hand working on something, it turns from solitary fingers moving individually by themselves into me playing, I don't know, Peer Gynt or Pakbel, canon or something like that. It gives completion. You can't do things by yourself. So organized religion, organized atheists, organized whatever you want to have it, gives movement to whatever goal that you've got set, whether it be to really study the self, or to bring about peace and love your neighbor, or to cherish memory, or to, struggle with jihad, or to, just figure out what you're doing and how you're doing it. It's that collective movement that kind of helps get, more than one person. We're not living in isolation towards some goal, I guess. Is that intelligent enough?
Yeah, that was a really interesting question. It reminded me of last year. I was not the leader of the Christian club at this point, but I went to a meeting, and it was about kind of religion and government, and it was the time of the election, and people were talking about each candidate referring to their faith or not referring to their faith, and in different settings. Like there was a clip of Obama in a church really, really being open about his faith, and then there was like another time when someone in the interview asked him about his faith and he was like, that's not important. And so I was actually thinking in this meeting, and then we ended up having this kind of debate that actually got pretty heated, whether it was actually a good thing or a bad thing for politicians to be faithful. And in that time, we were talking about Christianity, but that could be, with anything, that there was a person who strongly felt that it was a really negative thing because it meant that the person was irrational. And there was another person that felt that it was super important because it meant that that person definitely had morals. And I would argue that, like what Thor was saying, that, obviously Americans, a lot of them think that an atheist, could never be president for that reason. Like they don't have a moral code or something. And we can clearly see that's not true. And that not all Christians are going to be good leaders, or are they going to be good people? Yeah, so it's an interesting question.
Okay, well, I think that having some sort of organized institution to the scale that religious institutions have so much potential to do so much good and equal amount of potential to do bad. And I think that that's why it's really important for a religion that's going to be an organized institution to really, really emphasize self-reflection, really force really difficult questions upon you. I know, like for just in my personal experience, Rosh Hashanah through Yom Kippur is a time where it doesn't have to talk about God, nothing like that. It's just that you are asked really hard questions, and as a community, and try to move through it. That's why actually a lot of what she's saying about Buddhism reminds me so much of Judaism. And I think it's kind of things like that, and as well as the general push towards questioning authority, etc., that can kind of serve as a check and balance for organized religion. If that doesn't exist, I think that's when things get corrupt. That's why a religion can get its bad name and lose its power to do what it really wants to serve, which is to join people together and work in ways to make the world a better place and whatnot. So as long as there's that check and balance, I think it has a lot of positive potential. But unfortunately, when politics and obviously competition and like disagreements between faiths get in the way of it serving its function positively.
I think y'all nailed it.
So my question's a little bit more...
Can you speak a little more?
Sure. My question's a little bit more dependent on you guys as individuals and as products of your upbringings rather than attributing to your whole faith. But I'm just curious, are any of you comfortable with marrying outside of your faith? Are you really set on marrying in, raising your kids of your faith, and kind of what's behind that?
Did everybody hear that question?
Yeah.
Well, I'm already married. I was not Buddhist when I met my partner. I don't know, it was kind of, I want to say it was neither here nor there, but it just was kind of, I think the principles were there, and that's where we met, that it was, it was not necessary for me to be Buddhist for us to fall in love, so that's that. As far as having kids and whether we would raise them, I think that's a really deep question, and I think at least in my community so far, it's been a really kind of beautiful example, and there are several families with young kids at Green Gulch, and for the most part what I have seen is that they just kind of, they're raised in the community, so there's kind of this inevitability that they're around our practices, but they're in no way kind of forced to do anything, so they're kind of just allowed to sort of soak in what they soak, ask questions when they want, and kind of reap the benefits of a really healthy community, I think. And we were part of, my husband and I both were actually part of this program called the Coming of Age program, which is a program for 7th and 8th graders. And it's kind of rooted in Buddhist principles, but even then, it was still, just kind of in this tradition of questioning and creating a safe space to allow young people to just kind of take their place in the world and sort of see what that means for them. So there's still always this real open quality to it with kind of some foundations of love and compassion and understanding. And so for me, that's kind of all you need, whether you're Buddhist or not.
Well, I know one thing my mom's always reiterated to me throughout my life is the importance that you can be different with this, you can have different interests, but you need to have the same core values. And I think that, so in that way, I think that having someone with shared core Jewish values would be really important to me. However, I would not be close. If I fell in love with someone, they weren't Jewish, but they're open to me being Jewish and raising my kids Jewish, I would, of course, have no problem with that and would be open to integrating components of their faith along with raising my children as well. But it would be ideal for me, for my husband to be Jewish, like, honestly.
Yeah, I totally agree about the core values, that I don't think I would necessarily need someone I marry to believe in God even, or to be Christian, but I would expect them to be a good person. And that's more of a value that just, for me, it comes from my religion, but it doesn't obviously have to. And for my kids, I mean, I've been really lucky to, I think my main kind of experience with religion when I was younger was actually at school, because I went to school in England and we said the Lord's Prayer at assembly and sang hymns and everything. But at home, I wasn't expected to be anything really, and that meant that I think that just made my faith stronger because it was coming from me and not from my parents. And so I would hope that my children would not necessarily feel it necessary to have organized religion if they don't feel like it, as long as I raise them to be nice.
This is a great question because I happen to be getting married this summer. And my fiance is not a Baha'i. He is aware about the principles of Baha'i faith. He loves them. We're doing marriage class on Tuesday nights. And, we're kind of talking about this, that core values are what's essential. So you have a set of principles and values that you've got, that you were either born with or discovered along the way that are very important to you. And as long as those sync up and are not in conflict with one another, you can work through a lot of the little differences. And, one of the interesting things about child rearing in the Baha'i faith is one of the principles of the Baha'i faith is the independent investigation of truth. This means that, you are not to be kind of told what to believe. You are presented with information. You are presented with Baha'i information. You are presented with, teachings from Buddha, presented with teachings from Christ and Muhammad and Zoroaster and Abraham and Moses. And so you get a wide range of information. And then at the age of 15, which the Baha'is consider the spiritual age of maturity, you are able to decide what path is going to be most appropriate for you as an individual. So in that light, I'm totally okay with marrying someone of a different faith or no faith at all, as long as our values are the same.
According to my religion, I am allowed to marry somebody outside of my religion, but personally, I don't think I would do that because I feel like I'm alright having friends and more than friends with people who are not Muslim. However, if we were to have a family together, I feel like our beliefs would clash, and that wouldn't be really good. I haven't really thought about marriage. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, totally in line with the core values and everything. Yeah, definitely. I think really the most important, thing would be that they could tolerate a lot of intense philosophical discussion. And I mean, I have very, very few friends that can do that, so, you know, good luck to me, but that's about it.
Thanks, guys. If it's a brief question.
I just want to know, because I go to school with you, I've been in your classes, and I was not aware that you go to the mosque 1 to 3 times a day, and I'm wondering how TAM admin and teachers have been with that.
Usually I go for Jummah prayers. Those are like Sunday prayers for Muslims. After lunch on Fridays, I usually come back in the middle of 7th period, which is our final period of the day. But this year I had chemistry that period, so I didn't really go. Because, you know, it's a pretty important class. You can't really miss too much of it. So yeah, I've usually just did that. What was the other part of your question? Sorry.
Yeah, the teachers are understanding.
Oh yeah, the teachers are understanding. Yeah, like I said before, people in Marin are very understanding and accepting of a lot of different cultures. So, for example, I asked my teacher last year's and years before, and they said, yeah, it's totally fine. They had students before and students right now that do that, so they completely understand what I have to do or what I had to do.
We only have time for one more question, unfortunately, and the panelists will have to be brief with their answers.
Okay, I guess this is mostly directed for Lizzie, because I know you're on the Interfaith board, but I open it up to everyone. Because you've all expressed how important your individual faiths are in your life. And so I'm wondering what motivates you to be a part of Interfaith and to work with other religions, and if that makes you different in your individual faiths, or if you find that a lot of people in your faith are open to doing things with other organizations.
At least in my personal Christian community, I feel like it's very, very open to working together with other faiths and with non-religious people. But I would argue that it's kind of a core value to many Christians that anyone who's not Christian is going to hell. And that can be a kind of a barrier between people.
I think that for me, where this is starting from, this is kind of more recent, because I don't know that I would ever call myself a very religious person, but just knowing the suffering that is caused around the world because of these clashes in values, that this seems like the kind of the most fertile ground to sort of meet, and just feeling my own frustrations and just seeing the pain and the hurt constantly of people not being able to find a place to meet lovingly, I just feel like is a huge inspiration for wanting to just promote conversation and create safe spaces like this where people are here with the intention of being respectful and inquisitive. It's just there's so much destruction happening because of religion or due to kind of misgivings about it.
I totally agree with that. Okay. So the Atheist and Skeptics Club has worked a bunch of times with the InterVarsity Christian Fellowship on campus. We've worked with other religious groups that have been through the campus. We've hosted dual events together, or they've invited us to events. We've gone to their. They've come to our events. They've had philosophical discussions with us. We're having our last book club meeting tomorrow. Actually, we have a joint book club. We're talking about stuff. It's awesome. I think seriously, I think everyone of all you hear about is like the extreme cases on the news. You hear about the bombings and the explosions, and you never hear about just the normal, everyday people who are just want to live their lives. Like, they don't, they don't want the craziness or like the chaos. They don't want people dying around them. I think the majority of people in the world just want to live. They just want to live. And I think, just having more of these kinds of things, more of these panel discussions, is extremely important to that end, just to give that voice to those people.
That was a good question to end on. Before we close, actually, Stephanie is going to close up the evening with some announcements and a few words.
My name is Stephanie. I am a part of the MIC Youth Initiative group that hosted this event, and I'm also one of the co-founders of Next Generation Unity, which is a young adult group of 18 to 35-year-olds. We meet once a week to get together and have discussions pretty similar to what you guys did today. We talk about philosophical, spiritual, religious topics every week. I really love the way that you guys answered that last question, and really everything you said. I agree with that. It's really important to work together and bring our faiths together and learn about different faiths so that we can better understand each other. And I really think that I'm holding on to this childhood dream of world peace. And my personal belief is that if we can learn to coexist religiously, that everything else is going to fall into place, and that we can really start to think about a global unified community. So that's why I'm here. That's why I have interest in being involved in Marin Interfaith Council. And on that note, I would like to thank MIC for hosting this event for us. And thank you to the Dominican Sisters for letting us have our event in this beautiful room. Yeah, thank you. Thank you also to our panelists for sharing and teaching us a little bit about your faiths. And of course, thank you all for being here, and thank you for your great questions and for your support. I do have an announcement. Marin Interfaith Council is having a fun social gathering Thursday, June 26th at 6 o'clock. You can visit their website, marinifc.org, and get on the email list and find out some more about that event. And then I would also like to share a quote with you and just have a couple moments of silence so that we can reflect on what we heard and just be. So get comfortable in your chair, close your eyes if that's what suits you. This quote is from Walter Cronkite, and he said, "Never before has the need for interfaith commitment been nearly as great as it is in this very moment." So let's just take that into a couple seconds of reflection. Thank you all for being here, and feel free to stay. We still have some refreshments, and come talk to us and talk to the panelists and each other. Thank you so much.
This is really wonderful that you guys are all here. Thank you so much. And the passion in this room is so empowering. And thank you again to all of you for coming.
Hi, my name is Hallie Goldstein, and I'm a senior at Drew School in San Francisco. I am someone who would define myself as a very active Jew in my community, both culturally and religiously. And I was really touched tonight by the amount of energy in the room and the turnout. It's really refreshing to come to a place where I feel like we live in a world where, in our culture, religion isn't necessarily something that is often talked about, especially in the community that I live in, and coming to a place where it's such a safe place to talk about it and to hear about such a diverse array of experiences and of backgrounds was quite refreshing and inspiring and encourages me for the future.
I'm Ari. I'm a senior at Marin Academy in San Rafael, and I'm a proud Jew. My family are members of Kol Shafar in Tiburon. something I thought was really beautiful about the panel tonight was both the similarities in the ways I connected with people across faiths and the differences in what each person said. I think there's a lot of beautiful, unique qualities of each religion, and it's important to celebrate both the ways that we are the same and different in our belief systems. So this is an awesome presentation, and the work that the Marin Interfaith Council is doing is so important.
Hi, my name is Anna Cardall. I'm a senior at Marin Academy in San Rafael. And this night was really awesome for me because I'm Catholic, Roman Catholic, and I'm going to be attending a Jesuit college next year. So it's really fascinating for me to hear about other people's religions, especially outside of Christianity, because I don't get to hear very much about Judaism, Baha'i, Islam, and so it was just fascinating for me to kind of hear other people's perspectives living in the same area, going through very similar things that I am, especially next year going to a school that there'll hopefully be a large interreligious dialogue, which is one of the reasons that I'm so excited to be attending.
My name is Bethany Nelson. I was one who helped organize this event, and truly it was even more inspirational than I even expected. Just to hear younger people, I'm rather young myself, but people even younger than me, talk about faith, but not just about faith, about working together, about unity, about understanding, about community. Just really gives me hope, really gives me inspiration to go back into my ministry and take this vision of the young people and bring it to my church community, because it is powerful what we can do when we work together and understand where everyone's coming from and realize how many connections we actually have. A great evening.